Continuing my series with the most commonly asked questions during job interviews, the non-technical ones. That is, today I'm going to cover the 23 most asked rather behavioral questions in Microsoft interviews. And before beginning, I believe it's very interesting to mention that Microsoft has had some rather interesting initiatives lately that you have for about 2 years now. I believe they have 3 leadership principles, which are quite straightforward to understand: create clarity, generate energy, and deliver success. Why is this relevant? Well, it's relevant because they very much emphasize on them, even if only for a few years now. Unlike other companies, they do emphasize on them, and I believe these 3 principles, if you read them with their description included, you are very likely to score a lot better in these interviews. So without further ado, let's get to the questions. So the 23rd most commonly asked question in Microsoft interviews is: tell me about the time when you came up with a new approach to a problem. Why they would ever want to ask you such a question? Because they want to see on whether you like to simplify things, you're someone who is curious about coming up with innovative solutions to problems. It should go without saying, but this is a behavioral question, so the standard way to answer these questions is with the STAR method. That is, to present the situation with the task, then present the action, and then present the result. In other words, the result. After you presented a new approach, you had a new approach to the problem, what was the result of that situation? What was the impact of your solution? Next question: what did you do when you needed to motivate a group of individuals? Why would they want to ask you these questions? Is because they want to see your interpersonal skills and your ability to listen and your ability to coach other people. So also interesting here to reference is your ability to build trust with other people. And of course, it's a combination of listening and coaching and setting up meetings on a recurrent basis, and so on and so forth. And another interesting thing to keep in mind here is that you should make a clear difference between cold communication methods, that is email, and warmer ones such as face-to-face, or even through video. So whenever you need to motivate a group of individuals, email is less efficient as compared to a face-to-face meeting or through a video chat. Right, moving on. What is the best invention or idea you had in the past 2 years? So this one goes hand in hand with the first one. You should think about the genuine invention that you had with some impact. Ideally, there should be some impact there they should be talking about. So make sure that you put it in a STAR format and you prepare it in advance. So notice here also they prefer recent examples as compared to older ones, if possible. Tell me about the time when you missed an obvious solution to a problem. This is again on the same lines of problem solving. They want to see a time when you wished you could have done better, but they want to see your thought process there. So you actually missed an obvious solution to a problem, but you must develop on how you went above and beyond while solving that problem eventually. Tell me about the time when you were not able to meet the time commitment. What prevented you from meeting it, and what was the outcome, and what did you learn from it? This is a negative story. A time you were not able, you failed to meet the time commitment. So the most important thing here is that you come up with a strong example, with a strong situation where you didn't meet the time commitment. How do you know it's a strong situation? Where there was an impact for that. If you cannot quantify the failure in terms of time commitment, the damage done or the impact done, then it means it is more likely a hypothetical story here, and it's not a great one. This is how you would go about not being able to meet the time. This is a negative story. With negative stories, within the STAR format, you go with the situation, spend 1 or 2 sentences on the situation, then you spend 2 or 3 sentences on the action, present the actual failure, and then 3 or 4 sentences on the results, which are synonym to the learnings from that experience. So you should talk about the learnings from that specific situation. These are some of the hardest examples to come up with for behavioral interviews. Describe a long-term project that you manage. How do you keep everything moving along in a timely manner? So notice here, this is not a negative but a positive question. So whenever you're getting asked a positive question, that's something that you could be able to capitalize if you have a strong example. Your ability to self-advertise and to shine here, to focus on your strengths, right? So a long-term project that you manage should actually highlight the strength, your strength. Now, don't talk about the long-term project that you managed in which nothing happened. There should be some events there. There should be some events that would allow you to showcase your strengths in such a way that your strengths made the difference there, made the difference between success and failure in that project. So make sure you have a compelling story here. You usually prepare these things while preparing an answer for tell me about yourself, the introductory questions. Tell me about the time when you had a conflict at work. The number one reason why they would want to ask you such a question is because they want to see your interpersonal skills. And more often than not, people don't come up with genuine examples or genuine conflicts at work. Why they avoid to do this? Because it's very easy to put the blame on someone else. And if you do so, you're actually likely to get disqualified in an interview. So this is why it's a good idea to prepare and probably not just prepare it on paper, but say it out loud, eventually to someone, to some friend, just to see how it sounds and see whether it's going to be a good idea. So more often than not, once you speak out an answer, it becomes obvious whether it's a good one or a bad one. Tell me about the time when you work with a difficult team member. Same stuff. Many people tend to come up with weak examples here. You must think it's impossible not to have worked with a difficult team member, even if you're a recent graduate. Or I should say, especially if you're a recent graduate. But you should always keep in mind, you listen, you employ your listening skills, you act diplomatic, and you try to be productive. Like it's a commercial business that we're talking about here, so keep that in mind always. Tell me about the time when you failed and what you learned from it. So this is the classic failure, right? So whenever you prepare a failure story, I'd very much prefer a failure story in a professional context, needless to say, and not just that, but within a team context. Tell me about a team project that failed because of you. So as I earlier mentioned in the example with the time when you failed to meet the time commitment, the failure stories are 1 or 2 sentences for the situation, 2 sentences or 3 for the action, the actual failure, and 3 sentences, and the most important, for the learnings from it. Needless to say, it must be a genuine one. The way you know it's genuine if you quantify it, unless avoid hypothetical situations, because these are the situations that don't work well in these contexts. Everyone starts somewhere. Talk about the time when you were new on the job and had a lot to learn. How did you manage that? So the reason why they would ask you this is because they want to see your ability to learn new things, to accumulate information. And more often than not, this cannot be done all by yourself, but you should also inspire from other people, from your environment. Take advantage of your colleagues and of your team to do this. So these are some pointers that, exhibit curiosity. This would be probably a good way to sum it up. Tell me about the time when you took the lead on a difficult project. So here the number one problem people have is to come up with an example where they actually took the lead on the project. You see, it could be a time when you actually stepped in to take the project. It could also be a time when you were assigned to take on a project. But the point is that you must showcase the fact that you led that project. For example, leaders create other leaders should be an interesting quote to make you think about these things, and think about the three principles, like create clarity, generate energy, and deliver success. So these would be what the leadership looks like from within a Microsoft context. Next question. Tell me about the time when you found it difficult to work with someone from a different background. This is the cultural question. So a time when your interpersonal skills, how did you, the main point here is to talk about time when you gain the other person's trust and respect, and of course you stay diplomatic, and of course you ended up in a great working relationship. Tell me about time when you recover from a difficult situation. So what's interesting to note about this question is that it's not a negative story. A challenging situation doesn't mean the outcome was a negative one. So if the outcome wasn't a negative one, then you should basically choose a positive one whenever you can. This is because they want to see about your decision-making process and your ability to not only think it all by yourself, but probably to also take information from outside, from other people as well. So these will be some pointers here. Next, give me an example of a time when you faced a conflict while working on a team, and how did you handle that? Conflict means interpersonal skills, means first you listen, then you act in a diplomatic way, then you set up meetings to discuss, eventually ask for others' opinions, and this is how you go. And more often than not, it's not a straightforward thing, straightforward job to come up with the great examples from the first shot. So make sure you find the best possible example here. Tell me about the time when you had to deal with ambiguity. So the main reason why someone would ask you this in a job interview is because they want to see how your decision-making process, how you quantify the various aspects of a problem, of a rather ambiguous problem. So maybe you should think about the time when you had to deliver something on short notice that was not having all the elements, where you actually took ownership of the situation and balanced the pros and cons on each and every option. So the way that you balance that, the pros and cons, that's actually what they are most interested in your thought process here. And by the way, don't forget about the STAR method, that is to always put it in a quantifiable context. This is something every interviewer appreciates, because it allows them to understand the importance of the situation and the impact that it had. Tell me about the toughest decision you had to make in the past 6 months. Now, this may not sound like a complicated question, but trust me, it's very easy to get in trouble with this one, because most people tend to underestimate the importance of a decision or certain elements in taking a decision. So that's why you must definitely prepare this one in advance. And it's not only about the example of the decision, but the thought process is, the same as dealing with the ambiguity. How did you arrive to that decision, and why it was important, and of course what was the impact of this? So you could, for example, pick an example when you dealt with ambiguity that would fit also in the toughest decision you had to make in the past 6 months. That could perfectly be the case. They are on the same lines. It's just that you see, because of the fact it's in the past 6 months, it will be a bit more challenging and tricky to come up with an example quickly. Next, what's your greatest strength, and do you have any weaknesses? So the greatest strengths, usually people come up with strengths quite easily, and I would recommend you to pick up a main strength, something that you're really good at, and this should be showcased throughout the conversation. You could of course always take a look at the job description and essentially see what could work best from your 3 main strengths. Think about specific situations where your main strength made a difference, and more often than not you'd want to talk about this when answering "Tell me about yourself," into which you'll present some highlights of your career, and more often than not focus on your strengths whenever you talk about examples. Don't make it boring, like by repeating the same keyword over and over again, but you know what I mean here. So this is for the strength, but the weaknesses are something that people struggle the most with, and the reason why they struggle the most with is because many choose to turn something positive about them into something negative, such as they pay too much attention to details. You see, it's of course that when you apply for a company such as Microsoft, that you pay attention to detail. So what if you pay too much attention to detail? I mean, it's not always that bad, right? After all, so try to find something that you could really summarize better as something that's not very easy to alter, such as, you're an introvert. Okay, you're an introvert, you cannot become an extrovert the next day, right? So you're an introvert, you want to become more sociable, and whenever you get into social interactions, you'd notice and you'd automatically program yourself to be up front, to take the initiative, the situation. Or if you're applying for a sales role, maybe technical experience is not your thing, vice versa, technical sales is not your thing. So this is the environment that you want to go. I made also other videos with examples of weaknesses if you want more details here. Let's say you're working on a major project and you're in the weeds. How do you find your way out? So, of course, why could the project be in the weeds? Well, because you underestimated a deadline, maybe, in which case you would be talking about how you informed the relevant stakeholders of the project that, hey, we are experiencing some unforeseen situations and we want to see what's going on. You would communicate about this. Or maybe some team member of yours abruptly left the project, or a key member of the project left it, and the project was in danger. So how you hired someone. But this is actually another of those questions to talk about a challenging situation, a main highlight where one of your strengths made the difference in your career. And so long as you put it in a star format, and you keep it around 2 minutes long, I believe you should be good to go here. Number 5, most commonly asked question is, tell me about the time when you made sure a customer was pleased with your service. And this is one of the 2 questions about the customers at Microsoft. So the first thing to understand here is, when we talk about customers, we talk about primary customers. That is someone you work with. You're not like indirect customers and so on and so forth. So very important to understand these things. The idea is that you find a scenario where you started with the customers and work backwards for their needs. So that's how you make sure they are pleased with your service, unless you have something more special. Anything would work, so long as it's preferably in a star format, and you are able to quantify the situation, to give an importance of how important it was to do what you did in that situation. Next, number 4, we all deal with difficult customers from time to time. Tell me about the challenging client-facing situation and how you handled it. So it's pretty much on the same line with the previous one. Actually, you can group this together with if you have a great example. Number 3, tell me about the situation where you had to solve a difficult problem. So this is actually more like an umbrella for the challenging situations. So whenever you think about a difficult problem, I mean, it could easily fit at least 4 or 5 of the other questions that I referenced here. The reason why I mentioned them in a separate context is because, you see, this one is the umbrella, but these could come in so many flavors, and you could actually get asked multiple questions during an interview. So that's why you want to prepare multiple examples of challenging situations. So this is why I put it in many different flavors here. Of course, you should put it in a star format, in a quantifiable problem, context, that it has to be a genuine problem. If it's a recent one, probably even better. Think about the job description when you're picking the problem, and make sure it's again a quantifiable result for this scenario. The second most asked question in Microsoft interviews is, actually a gift that they give to you. Tell me about a team project that you worked on, or you could also rephrase this into what's the most successful project that you ever worked on. If you remember earlier on in the video, I said that the way you'd go about answering this, the best time to prepare answer for such a question would be when preparing tell me about yourself, when you would prepare some of the main highlights in your career, basically the projects you're the most proud of. And the only difference between what you prepare when tell me about yourself and here tell me about the team project that you worked on is that you must spend a bit more time on the action, on how you actually worked as a team player within that context, and of course focus on your interpersonal skills, on you being a likable person, someone they would really enjoy working with at Microsoft. And don't forget the results section of this, because it might sound counterintuitive that this is a behavioral question still, but tell me about the team project that you worked on. Yes, it is asking you for a past experience in order to predict your future performance on the job. So what was the result of that most successful project that you ever worked on? A team project, of course. And the most asked question in any Microsoft interview is, unsurprisingly, why Microsoft? And there is one main note that I would like to highlight here, is what most people do with these questions is they do not spot the opportunity to differentiate themselves from other candidates. And they don't do. What they basically do is they praise Microsoft and that's it, leave it there. A better approach with these things would be to say, hey, I want to work at Microsoft for 3 reasons. First could be, okay, you praise Microsoft if you choose so, but the second should be, how can you make a difference there? What are the main differentiators between you and other candidates? Why should they pick you instead of other people? And the third reason would be, what's in for you from all this? Or if you want to rephrase this from an HR perspective, where do you see yourself in the next 5 years? Right? So these should be by emphasizing these 3 key elements while talking about yourself, while answering why Microsoft, you actually create differentiators, and hopefully you will also create some starting point for some rather engaging and interesting conversations. Keeping in mind, of course, as always, that those 3 leadership principles: create clarity, generate energy, and deliver success. So it's always within this context that you must frame these things. So there you go. These are the most commonly asked questions in Microsoft interviews, and with some commentary from myself and from my coaching experience. So hopefully you found this information useful, and thank you very much for watching.